Have you ever just looked at the sheer variety of plants out there, from the moss on a rock to a giant redwood tree, and wondered, how in the world are these things related? Well, today we're going to crack that code. We're diving into how scientists bring order to the beautiful, sprawling chaos of the plant kingdom.
So here's our roadmap. First, we're going to see just how big this puzzle is. Then, we'll check out the clever systems scientists came up with to solve it. And finally, we'll trace the whole evolutionary story through the major plant groups, watching all the pieces fall right into place.
You know, trying to organize the plant kingdom is a bit like trying to organize a library with millions of books, but you don't have any system to go by. The diversity is just mind-blowing.
Right, this is the big question. Where do you even begin? How do you build a system that makes sense of everything from microscopic pond scum to the biggest trees on the planet, and not just group them, but actually tell the story of their family history?
And this right here just says it all. I mean, look at this. On the left, you've got Volvex, basically a tiny, hollow ball of algae cells just floating around. On the right, a huge, complex pine tree with roots, a trunk, and seeds. How on earth can they both be in the same kingdom? That is the puzzle we need to solve.
So, to figure this all out, scientists didn't just pull one system out of a hat. No, they developed a whole toolkit of methods, and that toolkit has gotten way more sophisticated over the years.
The first try was what we call the artificial system, and the big name here is Carolus Linnaeus. The idea was to use really simple, obvious traits, like, is it a tree or a shrub? What color are the flowers? It's like organizing your bookshelf just by the color of the book covers. Yeah, it's quick and easy, but it doesn't really tell you anything about what's inside the books.
So, the next big step forward was the natural system. This was way more clever. Instead of just looking at the outside, scientists like Bentham and Hooker started looking deeper at internal anatomy, how the embryos develop, that kind of stuff. Now, in our library, we're organizing by genre. All the science fiction goes together, all the history goes together. It just makes more sense because you're grouping things that are actually related.
And that brings us to what we use today, the gold standard, the phylogenetic system. This one is all about family history. It's about evolution. The whole idea is that organisms are grouped together because they share a common ancestor. This is like organizing the library by author and the year the books were published. You don't just see which books are similar, you see the entire family tree of how ideas evolve from one another. It's the whole story. This table lays it all out beautifully. You can literally see how our thinking has evolved. We went from just looking at superficial stuff with the artificial system, to finding deeper connections with the natural system, and finally to understanding the entire evolutionary story with the phylogenetic system. Each one was a crucial step on the ladder to getting it right.
Okay, so we've got our scientific toolkit. Now let's get our hands dirty and start putting this puzzle together. We're going to start at the very beginning with the simplest plants around, the algae and the bryophytes.
You know, algae are the true unsung heroes of our planet. Their body is super simple. It's called a thallus, which means no real roots, stems, or leaves. But don't let that fool you. These guys are absolute powerhouses. They perform about half of all the carbon dioxide fixation on Earth. That's a fancy way of saying they produce a massive amount of the oxygen that we all need to breathe.
So how do we tell all the different algae apart? Well, the clues are right in the names: green, brown, and red. And this table breaks it down perfectly. You can see they get their unique colors from different pigments. And they also store their food in different ways. Green algae use starch, brown algae use something called mannitol, and red algae use Floridian starch. It's these kinds of chemical fingerprints that help us classify them.
And hey, if you're ever studying for a test on this stuff, here's a fantastic little memory trick from the source material. To remember some of the big names in green algae, just think of a green SUV, maybe with a vanity plate that says CSV SUV. That stands for Climatidomonas, Chara, Spirogyra, Ulathrix, and Volvox. Pretty clever, right?
All right, moving on up. Next are the bryophytes, which includes things like mosses. Now, these are the pioneers, the first plants to really make a go of it on land. They have this great nickname, the amphibians of the plant kingdom. And it's perfect, because just like a frog, they can live on land, but when it's time to reproduce, they have to get back to water.
Okay, now, you need to pay close attention to their life cycle because this is a huge deal. That green, leafy, carpet-like stuff that you think of as moss, that's the main plant. It's called the gametophyte, and it's the dominant part of its life. That little stalk you sometimes see growing out of the top, that's the other part of its life, the sporophyte, and it's totally dependent on the main plant.
Now get that picture in your head because it's about to be completely flipped upside down. And here it is, the main event. We're talking about a massive evolutionary leap forward. Let's look at the Pteridophytes and the Gymnosperms, two groups that came up with some absolute game-changing technology for living on land.
This slide right here shows the single biggest plot twist in the entire history of land plants. Remember how with moss, the main plant was the gametophyte? Well, starting with ferns and everything after them, the roles completely reverse. The sporophyte, the part that makes spores, becomes the big, dominant plant we see, while the gametophyte shrinks down to almost nothing. This was the key that unlocked the door to growing tall and taking over the land.
And the fern life cycle shows this perfectly. The big, leafy fern you might even have as a houseplant, that's the sporophyte. It's large and in charge. And its gametophyte? It's that tiny little heart-shaped thing called a prothallus. It lives a completely separate, and much shorter, life. This switch was a huge deal.
Okay, so what's the next big invention? The seed! And the pioneers who figured this out were the Gymnosperms. The name literally means naked seed, and it's a great description. Just think about a pine cone. The seeds are sitting right there on the scales, totally out in the open, not tucked away inside a fruit like an apple seed is. This was an incredible new way to protect and feed the next generation.
And their life cycle reveals the other game changer, pollen. This was brilliant. Instead of having sperm that needs to swim through a film of water, Gymnosperms release these tiny little grains of pollen that can travel for miles on the wind. This diagram shows how the pollen is literally delivered by air, right to the doorstep of the ovule. This one invention completely cut the cord to water for reproduction. It let them finally conquer dry, inland areas.
So let's just recap the incredible story we've just followed. We started with simple algae living in the water. Then the Bryophytes took those first brave steps onto land, but they had to stay near the water's edge. Then the Pteridophytes developed internal plumbing, vascular tissue, that let them stand up and grow tall. And finally, the Gymnosperms invented the seed and pollen, truly mastering life on dry land. We've solved the puzzle by just following the clues left by evolution.
And that leaves us with this final, really exciting thought. This family tree we've been building, it's not set in stone. As our tools for reading DNA get more and more powerful, we are constantly discovering shocking new relationships and redrawing the branches. The story is still being written. So the real question is, what other amazing secrets are still hidden away in the great family tree of plants, just waiting for us to find them?